criminal organizations who are utilizing the weakness of the Biden strategy at the border and his both. We're going to talk about with Secretary Mike Pompeo, Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, the ACLJ, about this idea that words matter when you're president of the United States, when you're a leader, and when you basically tell the world that you're going to open up again. They take that literally. But the downfall of this is, of course, what it's costing the country, the national security threat it poses, and the humanitarian crisis it creates. It went from a non-crisis to a crisis because of Joe Biden's words and policies of his administration, hamstringing, of course, the Border Patrol. But think about this number. Criminal organizations that are trafficking women, children, families, single adults, the drugs, everything that goes together. The traffickers themselves are earning as much as $14 million a day. Right. That was back in February. It's only gotten worse since February. So what does that number get to, $18 million a day? On top of that, the Biden administration is having to spend $86 million on a contract for hotel rooms to hold 1,200 migrant families as the crisis exceeds the holding capacity for ICE. So, we're spending considerable amount of money, and the bad guys are making a considerable amount of money.
So you have to look at this in the context of an organized criminal activity, because that's what this is. You have these groups or cartels, and they run drugs, they run people, and they traffic people. What does that mean? You pay for your children to be brought over, and then you never really know what happens to them. That's, of course, the difficulty. You've got now a crisis at the border where children are being, again, displaced, held in fact, we could show it. We can show people this is what it looks like right now. If you're watching on any of our social media platforms or on TV, this is what it looks like.
They remove cages and put plastic wrap instead. Remember, these are the guys who built the initial cages, the Biden team. It was not the Trump team. And they're only supposed to be there 72 hours. They're staying for weeks plus.
Because there's nowhere for them to go.
Interesting, though, we have no obligation. Federal court judge found earlier this year, the U.S. is not legally obligated to accept unaccompanied minors. You can process them and get them right home to families wherever they are in Central America. Most of them are Central American minors. If you can locate a family member, you send them home. You don't take them into your country to then try to figure out where to put them or how to reunite them with their family, or is their family even there? Because we just pointed out, some of these traffickers are paid to send older kids over without their families. So they go over without families. They don't have someone to connect to here. They're kind of close to the age of adulthood, 16, 17 years old, and their families pay to get them over the border, thinking that somehow life will be, they'll get into a better school, they'll get into a better life.
But Joe Biden will not go down there and visit this. He will not visit the site.
He says at some point he will.
Yeah, well, that means he doesn't want to confront the problem. The only reason we have that picture
is a member of Congress. The media has not been allowed into these facilities.
What is the reaction in Washington? Because it's a crisis.
Yeah, well, it turns out that the U.S. policy has real ramifications, Jay. If you say that you won't get in and the law will be enforced, people don't come. If you say our borders are open and there's not going to be real enforcement, well, guess what? There's going to be a flood of migrants. It's exactly what we're seeing. And, Jay, it didn't take a guessing game. We knew this is what would happen.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what's happening. And what we're going to do, and I just asked Stan about this, why is there not bipartisan legislation dealing with the trafficking element? This is a continuing criminal enterprise, billions of dollars involved. You're talking about $14 million a day is what these traffickers are earning. $14 million a day. So then you ask yourself, how do we fight back? We'll talk about that when we come back from the break.
I want you to listen to how the Biden administration is trying to shift and act like this has nothing to do with them. So you've got the DHS secretary, and he's talking about this with Chris Wallace, and Mayorkas is saying, well, is this really, whose fault is this really that this is happening? Bite 10, take a listen.
We are on pace to encounter more individuals on the southwest border than we have in the last 20 years. Mr. Secretary, do you not see a connection between the surge at the border and the policy changes that Joe Biden has made in his first 2 months?
Chris, I do not. What I am seeing is the result, and what we are seeing is the result of President Trump's dismantlement of the safe and orderly immigration processes that were built over many, many years by presidents of both parties.
Nonsense, right?
Unreal.
I mean, that is just spinning to spin, because take a listen. Martha Raddatz went down to the border. She asked an immigrant, would you try this when Donald Trump was president? Take a listen to this, bite 23.
Would you have tried to do this when Donald Trump was president?
Definitely not. Definitely. We had the chance, the same violence that's going on today was there last year. We used to watch the news, and I definitely won't do this.
So did you come here because Joe Biden was elected president?
Basically.
There it is. They took Joe Biden's words as good, that the border is open again, things are going to change, or we're going to allow more illegal immigration into our country, or these asylum claims that end up not being adjudicated properly because they don't make sense because they didn't even hit the right language. I mean, what I see here is you see the Biden administration still unwilling to recognize the problem they've caused. They're going to still try to blame it on Donald Trump. But the immigrants themselves, the people down at the border themselves, are saying, we are here because of Joe Biden. They got signs saying we're here because of Joe Biden.
Well, look, I mean, here's the facts. I mean, we always have to do is we have to look at the facts, and the facts are very clear. And what is the facts? The facts are that we have a crisis at the border that Joe Biden says, well, I'll go down there at some point. Meanwhile, the policy he's implemented, you can't blame this on Donald Trump. The policy he implemented has allowed for this. And it was the Obama-Biden administration that put those cages in place. But I want everybody listening to our broadcast, we'll take your calls on this at 800-684-3110. Think about these children. And think about the fact that these cartel operators are making $14 million a day. And I asked this to Than during the break. How is there not bipartisan legislation to crack down on child trafficking? Now, with their state laws, we worked on those. But from a federal level, because that's what this is, child trafficking.
Yeah, we worked on the state laws, Jay. A lot of this does become a federal issue because so much of it happens immediately as they pour over the border. There have been bipartisan bills in Congress, Jay, and that most of them have fallen on sort of one of two sides of the ledger. One have been on a focus on prosecuting perpetrators. That's the enforcement piece of it. That's been met with stiff resistance on the left. That's been the challenge on that side of it. The second part of it has been care for the victims. You know, children, Jay, you said it, I think. Children are basically currency in this situation. They come across as property and a pass into the country. That's been sort of the second portion of bills. But, Jay, both of those bills are almost impossible to actually be successful and have true utility unless you have what? A secure border. If the border's not secure and you can't actually catch them as they come across, every bill that would pass is going to be very difficult to have utility. And that's really been the conundrum in D.C., Jay.
Yep. Yeah, no, this is a serious problem for our country.
Robert's calling from Maryland on line one. Hey, Robert.
Yeah, hi, Jordan, and hi, Jay. I wanted to ask the both of you about what's the estimated number of migrants that are a part of the caravan that are making their way to the border, and within that number of migrants that are coming toward the United States southern border, about what the percentage of them are unaccompanied minors.
Well, they don't have a breakdown of we don't have a breakdown yet of the unaccompanied minors per se. Do they have the exact breakdown or estimates?
It says it looks like in February, which is the month they have the latest statistics, about 2,200 children have been illegally crossing the border weekly in February. The government's projecting that about 9,000 children will be taken into custody by the end of February. So they're still going through those numbers. So somewhere close to 10,000 unaccompanied minors is what we're talking about in Robert. And I think it's only gotten worse from February to today.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're only getting numbers based off February's numbers. And I think you start including March numbers, you're talking probably about 20,000 unaccompanied minors. When you look at how this has got out of control also in the month of March. It's not like it's gotten better since February. It's gotten worse.
This is what the smuggling fees run for children somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000. For adults, it's $8,000 to $9,000. I mean, this is unreal. So this is the smuggling. I'm giving you the smuggling revenue from February, $34 million for children coming out of Central America. This is answering Robert's question. Central American families, another $80.7 million. Central American single adults, $139 million. Individuals from Mexico alone, $157 million. Total February, $411,500,000. Fan, this is a crisis at the border, and it is taxing our resources, and it is putting children in harm's way.
Taxing our resources, and it's a humanitarian crisis, almost that can't be explained. Jay, this is going to make people cringe, but I think they need to hear it. Another thing that happens to these kids is they get what's called recycled, and that's such a crass word. But, Jay, essentially they're brought over the border as a free ticket into the country, and then the people that bring them disappear into the interior of the country. What happens to the kids? Jay, they're sent back to be brought over a second time, recycled, if you will, to be the admission ticket for another set of people. Look, and the last thing I'll say on this, Secretary Mayorkas, Jay, it's awfully rich to hear his excuses on this, because the reason he was nominated, Jay, he's an infamous open borders guy. This is what he's about.
Well, we're paying, the country's paying the penalty for it, but you know who else is? These kids. That's who's paying the penalty.
It's a humanitarian crisis that the U.S. is responsible for creating. It's not to say that these other countries aren't aiders and abettors in Central America. But who is allowing this to occur, and who is spending the resources, our resources, your taxpayer dollars, $86 million on hotel rooms? This is an administration that's only been in office for 3 months. 3 months, and they've got a disaster like this where they're trying to cover up their eyes.
2 months.
Tried to close their eyes.
2 months.
And ignore the crisis at the border. They won't let the media in. They won't, only photos have gotten out because of members of Congress who have gone down there. They don't want the media in. They're not being transparent. Joe Biden's, still not doing press conferences, still won't go to the border. All this to be said, they were supposed to be so transparent. As usual, they're Democrats, they're liberals, they're the least transparent.
Not only the least transparent.
Surprise, it's the Obama team back again to mislead you, to lie, and hide information as long as possible. And they try to hide it sometimes for years.
They talked about the recycled children, which is horrific. This is a recycled administration.
Yes.
And you're seeing the same failed policies. And I'm going to tell you, when you have this kind of situation, you've got to be vigilant. Let's take one more call before the break.
Sure. Chris in Nevada on line 4. Hey, Chris.
Hi. If this was the Trump administration, there's no doubt somebody would be suing it. How come nobody's suing the Biden administration, even under some type of RICO theory?
I don't think it's a RICO theory, but I will tell you this. The attorney generals of Texas and I think Arizona are looking at litigation right now. Maybe Texas may have filed over the weekend. So it's not going to go unredressed because it's putting a tremendous amount of burden on Texas and the Texas administration. So, it's a multifaceted issue with a multifaceted problem.
I don't care about COVID when it comes to this.
No. Yeah, they don't require
another
COVID
large
testing.
gathering of people, mass gatherings in these mass facilities, and they love talking about Republican super spreader events. This is a super spreader event when you got people on the border that have not been vaccinated, who are coming from the tougher countries in Central America, and yet they're congregating in mass. And we're welcoming that.
Judy Sullivan on Facebook said the Biden team loves pointing the finger at Trump, but this isn't going to work this time. And Fan, it's not, because this is their policy.
Yeah, it's their policy, Jay, and the border towns that are bearing the brunt of this. And by the way, it's not just border towns. They're also going to have these facilities in interior states as well. Jay, I would imagine that those states, those localities, they'll look at this policy, and you'll probably start to see bipartisan pushback. That won't happen in D.C., Jay, but across the country, I bet you will.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Folks, we are going to look at ways in which we can protect these kids, first of all, coming over, but protect our country. So if these attorney generals start filing suits, the ACLJ is going to file right along.
So if you go on ACLJ.org, you'll say donate today. Your tax-deductible gift will be doubled. It's because we have a group of donors ready to match. Donate today. Double your impact to the ACLJ. Online at ACLJ.org. Joining us next, our team member, Mike Pompeo, one of the latest additions to the ACLJ team. He'll be joining us live. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We are joined by a special ACLJ senior counsel for Global Affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, a member of the ACLJ team, is joining us live now. Secretary Pompeo, it's always great to have you. You've got a new piece up at aclj.org called "The Regime in Iran Will Change Only When It Is at Risk." And you talk about one of the biggest misconceptions about the Iran nuclear deal, saying that there's this misconception out there that if there's no JCPOA, if there's no Iranian nuclear deal, there has to be war. But then again, you point out the Trump administration, your leadership and President Trump's, left the JCPOA, and there was no war.
Jordan, this thing was sold to us, this central thesis, which was, boy, if we don't bribe the Iranian regime, if we don't send them pallets of cash, if we don't look the other way when they conduct assassination campaigns in Europe and conduct terror against Israel, when they continue to underwrite Hezbollah, if we just allow them to do those things, maybe we can keep them from heading down a nuclear pathway. And the alternative, the only alternative that was facing America, was to confront them, and we'd end up in a war with Iran. We knew that wasn't true, and we proved it. We've now got 3.5 years where we can demonstrate that we left the JCPOA. We put enormous pressure on the regime. We made lives better for those people who weren't inside the regime, but instead around it. And the result of that wasn't war. We're not in a war with Iran. Iran knew we were serious. They knew that deterrence from the Trump administration was real. And we were charting a course towards getting an understanding from the regime that said, this will be enormously costly if you continue down this path. And we were close to getting to a place where we could have finally, once and for all, resolved this issue of nuclear weapons in Iran.
Secretary Pompeo, one of the issues that comes up frequently, and that is the proxy war nature of what the Iranian regime does. I think it'd be important for our audience to explain that it's just not Iranian soldiers operating in Iran, that they're throughout the Middle East.
Jay, that's really important. And our administration understood that, and we didn't let them get away with it. One of the things that a nation like Iran tries to do is to use these proxies to shield themselves. So if there's a missile launched from Yemen into Saudi Arabia, the Iranians would say, we don't have anything to do with this. We flipped that on its head. We held them accountable for each of those. So whether it was the Houthi terrorists in Yemen, whether it's the money that has gone to Hezbollah that holds Israel at risk, whether it's all that they did in Syria to cause 6 million people to live horrible lives by having to flee their homeland in Syria. These are the proxy forces. These are the surrogates that the Iranians use to foment terror around the world. And they do it because they hope that the United States will, like the Biden administration did, when there's a round that comes near an American, we'll respond by blowing up a building in Syria. We responded differently. We held the Iranian leadership itself accountable. The strike on Qasem Soleimani was the perfect example of that, where we didn't let the Iranians hide behind the skirts of the proxy forces.
But we know now that Secretary Pompeo, that you've got the Biden team in place who wrote this deal. They've risen to higher levels now. The author of it, main author, is the National Security Advisor to President Biden. So what you wrote in your piece, too, is that it looks like that they're on the plan to do whatever they can possible to try and appease this regime, to get them to come back to the table, if that's economic sanctions relief or whatever that may be, anything so that they can go and, as you say, and I say often too, so that John Kerry can go with his buddy Zarif and sip coffee or tea together. But it does seem like they are willing to do anything to get back to the negotiating table. But you point out that Ayatollah and the Iranian leadership, they're not going to do anything if it's not benefiting them immediately.
Yeah, Jordan, they do seem committed to it. It's the same cast of characters, whether it's Rob Malley or Wendy Sherman or Jake Sullivan. These were the folks who were the central authors of the Obama JCPOA, with Vice President Biden being supportive of it as well. So it's the same team. They're intent on it. It's something that they believe in deeply. They're wrong. What we hope is that they will see that this isn't 2014 or 2015 anymore, that the Middle East has changed, whether it's the work that we did to generate the Abraham Accords, whether it's the work that we did to put real pressure on the regime and allow the Iranian people for the first time to have a real shot at having leadership that cared about them and not about fomenting terror or stealing from them. We hope they'll see that the facts have changed so significantly. We hope they will see that the countries that are most at risk from Iran, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, and of course our deep, longtime partner, ally, friends of the state of Israel, we hope they'll see that those countries understand that Iran is the problem and not the solution, and that they will reconsider the path that they appear to be headed down. I'm not optimistic But I know that when they see the facts, when they read the intelligence that we saw, it is not possible to believe that going back into that deal makes any sense. And I don't think the Ayatollah thinks going back into that deal makes any sense for him and for his theocratic kleptocrats either.
Mike, one of the things that I found, and I continue to find interesting in all of this, is that there's an acknowledgement across the board that the Iranians are not, and the regime, we're not talking about the people, the regime is not in compliance with the JCPOA. Now, it's true that the United States pulled out, but the Europeans stayed in it. So if everyone's acknowledging that they violated the agreement, why in the world would we trust them and go back in? It makes no sense.
Jay, it makes no sense. It's something that's worth noting and that the Biden administration won't refer to as they had not complied with their commitments under the deal from the get-go. There was a requirement that they disclose all of their nuclear sites and nuclear material before the JCPOA could come into effect. It's complicated, but you'll remember Senator Cotton and I found some secret side deals on this very topic before the JCPOA was finalized. Seems like a long time ago. Suffice it to say, we now know for certain that they continue to have undeclared nuclear sites, that they never lived up to their commitments. And so your point is well taken. Before the deal, during the deal, and now even after the United States has left the deal, but the Europeans have remained, the Iranians have treated this as something that was something they'd do if it was useful and they wouldn't if it was not. There's no reason to think that going back into this agreement is going to have the Iranians come into full compliance with the promises that they have made.
You know, one thing I want to talk to you about today, too, the new blog is up. It's at aclj.org. The regime in Iran will change only when it is at risk. That is by Secretary Pompeo, ACLJ's senior counsel for global affairs. But I can't not ask you about what's happening at the border and the spin that we're starting to see for the Biden administration, but also some reality checks may be coming towards the Biden administration as well about how serious it is when they change the policy, and just how important it is the words you use, like Joe Biden's words he used. And you're seeing these people on the border interviewed saying, no, I wouldn't have tried this under President Trump, but Joe Biden basically said, come along.
Yeah, he invited them in. He created an incentive for them to come. And these people, these poor, desperate people are now coming, and they're coming in droves, and it is an enormous humanitarian crisis. It's also a crisis for the United States, a national security crisis for the United States. I was very involved in working with the foreign minister in Mexico and Mexico's president and putting the humane policies in place that allowed the people in El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala to understand they weren't going to be able to come into the United States, that it wasn't going to happen, that they didn't have valid asylum claims. And yet this administration's gone the other direction. It's tragic to watch what's going on out there each day. It's going to get worse. The policies that we put in place, and it took us many, many months to get them in place, ought to be reinstated. If we do, there'll be a more humane policy with respect to immigration. We'll shut down these unlawful pathways, and we won't create the incentives to risk American sovereignty either.
Former Secretary of State and former Director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, who happens to also be Senior Counsel for the ACLJ on Global Affairs. Thanks, as always, for being with us, and we encourage people, read the article, get informed. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jordan.
Remember, folks, the reason why we're able to have team members like Mike Pompeo join the American Center for Law and Justice is because of your financial support to the ACLJ. Whatever you donate is effectively doubled because we have a group of donors ready to match any donation that comes through. So donate today at aclj.org. That's aclj.org. Double your impact.
Thanks to your support of the ACLJ, we have had many victories.
The IRS now formally apologizing to Tea Party groups.
The IRS did the right thing by resolving the case with an injunction that mandated a complete change of the IRS nonprofit tax-exempt work as it relates to issue advocacy organization.
If any group feels like they're being targeted, they can go to federal court and bring our case that's a victory.
It's one of the most significant wins in the ACLJ's history, to take on the IRS and win.
For more than 27 years, the ACLJ has been fighting for freedom and liberty in the United States and around the globe.
These are young people in their 20s and 30s that are doing this. They're fighting for life at a whole new level to beat back the abortion juggernaut. We've got a whole group of young lawyers that are defending them.
Those of us that believe in life know that we're on the right side of history. We understand full well children are children, and they're precious in God's sight, and they're precious in our nation's sight, and they're precious to parents.
But I actually think we're winning this. This is one of the social issues we're winning.
The release of Andrew Brunson. He is the American evangelical from North Carolina, held in Turkey for more than 2 years.
They're rushing us to the airport, and there was an Air Force plane that came from Germany that had been on standby. We're flying, and they finally left Turkish airspace. It's like, okay, now we're really out of Turkey and free again.
We're grateful to ACLJ who put it out to these people, they were getting all this out.
All of the people who prayed for us through ACLJ and through your contacts, I'm thankful, I'm grateful, and actually I'm astounded.
We need your help as we continue this work here in the United States and around the world. Join the matching challenge today, and your tax-deductible donation will be doubled.